We have a story that just went up on InfoWars. Border Patrol says that cartels are using de facto amnesty to smuggle, quote, whatever they want, unquote, into the U.S. Now, that's a report from Rob Dew and Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs working with Kit Daniels. Rob Dew and Joe Biggs are at the border in El Paso. That's where they did that exclusive interview. They're going to be joining us later in the show. We're also going to be joined at the bottom of the hour with Paul Joseph Watson. And Alex Jones is going to be coming in with a special report. You know, on Fridays is the day that new releases come out at the movie theaters. And this is not a movie that's coming out today, but this is a movie that is going to be coming out, the sequel to Prometheus. And Alex Jones is going to break that down with what he knows about it. And we're also going to have on the show today psychiatrist Peter Breggin. This is someone who he's a practicing psychiatrist, a very extensive resume, an author of many books about the negative effects of SSRIs, of Ritalin, other drugs, the counterproductive effects of these drugs, as well as someone who has fought lobotomies early in his career. In the 1970s, he fought against lobotomies coming back. And if you remember back in December, there was a Wall Street Journal investigative report about what the VA did to veterans after World War II. If they had problems with PTSD, they just gave them lobotomies. Well, today, the DARPA and Obama's Brain Project, they're looking at other ways to deal with PTSD. They're looking at ways to selectively delete memories. Think about that. That brings Orwell's predictions about putting stuff down the memory hole into a very literal interpretation. So I want to talk to him about these new technological approaches to essentially doing lobotomies, the danger of that. And certainly he is someone who is aware of civil liberties issues as well. So we're going to have Dr. Peter Breggin on with us later in the show. It's a very packed show. Now, this article that just went up about what's going on at the border of El Paso, this is Stu Harris of the National Border Patrol Council. And he said that the cartels are pushing groups across the river to tie up our agents. He said, meanwhile, our agents are tied up processing and feeding these people, changing diapers, and the drug cartels are running whoever and whatever they want across the border and other places. He said, who or what is coming in, we don't know. And we won't know until something bad happens. Now, that is something we should really focus on, because as we look at what's going on in Iraq, as we look at the total failure of what we have done, the cost that we have suffered in terms of lives lost, 4,000 American lives, more than that. Who knows how many Iraqis have died there? The massive amount of money that has been spent there for people who are companies who are politically connected with their no big contracts. We look at the collapse of Iraq and we understand that the destruction of that nation came about when buildings collapsed. The original lie was not the Iraq lie. The original lie was the buildings collapsing. And now we have people who are pushing back against that in New York. And I want to play this clip real quickly here. Go ahead and play that clip, guys.
It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. It just pancaked.
Well, pancaking almost like a precision implosion.
It's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before.
It's Building 7.
The building was
it wasn't hit.
Destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
All non-essential personnel move away from that collapse.
Okay, now that's, I brought that up because there's a new measure on the New York City ballot that would force a probe of World Trade Center Building 7, which was never hit. And they talk about conspiracy theorists. Well, they're actually skeptics and investigators. They've collected 53,000 signatures to get that on the ballot.
Celebrate the spirit of freedom and liberty upon which our nation was founded at InfoWarsShop.com. Molon Lave is ancient Greek for come and take it. This popular design combines both classic Greek Spartan imagery with modern M16 assault rifles. Now available in women's tees and proudly made in the USA. Celebrate the spirit of 1776 with the George Washington brass belt buckle or this incredibly sharp-looking 1776 hat. Badass. And be sure to check out the new arrivals at InfoWars Life, where you can prepare your body to perform at peak levels with Survival Shield Nascent Iodine, Super Male Vitality, and Fluoride Shield. And wake up, America. Immune Support Blend is the healthy choice for the gourmet coffee lover. So get incredibly high-quality, freedom-based products and help fund the revolution at InfoWarsShop.com.
We talked about an article that he found where a former CIA agent was talking about the hope that he had that we were going to have a peaceful revolution that would result in greater freedom, not a violent revolution that's going to result in a totalitarian state. Today we have some very good news on another front about a sheriff who actually stood up for people's constitutional rights in a big way. So he's going to be joining us at the bottom of the hour. We also have reports coming from the border. We're going to be joined by Rob Dew and Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, who are in El Paso, looking at the border situation there. And they have interviewed one of the Border Patrol agents. Actually, he's he's with the National Border Patrol Union. I think he's vice president. Yes, vice president of that union in El Paso. He gave them an exclusive interview. That's up on Infowars.com right now. And he was talking about how dangerous it is that the cartels are using de facto amnesty to smuggle whatever they want to into the United States. That's right. They're putting in whatever they want to and whoever they want to. And as I was just pointing out in the last segment, we need to understand where this came from. We need to understand that this actually started not just with Obama. This is something that goes back 20 years, the beginning of NAFTA. And as General Petraeus pointed out last week, this is what comes after America. We have NAFTA. This is the fall, the collapse of America, and the rise of NAFTA. And this goes through multiple administrations. Started with the Clintons, who got it passed, and went through Bush, now being activated by Obama. And I think a couple of stories that are on Drudge Report right now from Infowars.com perfectly illustrates this policy. We've got an abandoned Walmart that is considered as feds explore immigrant shelter options. And that's a story by Don Salazar that's up on Infowars right now. He says feds are looking 1,500 miles inland to warehouse these people with a leaky roof and a building of Walmart. Now, Walmart is a vital company. They're doing great everywhere. They're some of the richest people in the world are the Walmart family. And yet, here is an area where this is a symbol of economic collapse. So what are they doing? They're bringing that in. They're bringing the people that are going to bring about and accelerate that economic collapse. This is a Cloward and Piven strategy to rapidly expand the welfare state, to bring the economy down, to burden it with this type of expense. This is something that was gamed out 50 years ago by these two guys, Cloward and Piven. So we see that happening in New York as they're busing in the, transporting them 1,500 miles into a Walmart that is literally collapsing. And then at the same time, we have this article that was from yesterday. Paul Joseph Watson has virtually crime-free county in Florida gets an MRAP armored vehicle. And, of course, these MRAPs, these are resistant to mines. These are military vehicles. He's got a picture. This is a gigantic vehicle. We got two guys standing here. The hood of the car is taller than these two guys. If you don't see that picture there, it is absolutely amazing. Now, this is an area, this is a little town called Walton, Florida. I mean, it sounds like the TV show from the 70s, The Waltons. Essentially no crime. But that's okay, because war is coming to America. Homeland Security is making sure of it. The same people that are collapsing the economy is symbolized by this dilapidated Walmart and this demographic surge. They are also arming people in the interior to fight whatever and whoever they're letting in the borders. At the same time, they continue the harassment of Americans within the United States, at the airports, in order to protect us from these same type of people against drug dealers, against terrorists who might come in through the airports. Well, they're letting them in at the border. And it's the same organization. It's Homeland Security that is doing both of these. And, of course, we had the article yesterday where the guy said, Well, you may not like the fact that we've got a SWAT team and all these atrocities that are occurring from the SWAT teams. Now, 80,000 incidents of this a year where people are attacked by SWAT teams. And, of course, the one that's about a month old where they threw a flashbang grenade into the crib of an 18-month-old child, and that child is still struggling for his life. He says, you may not like that, but you're not going to be complaining about that when ISIS comes home. How's ISIS going to get into the country? Well, they've opened up the borders, haven't they? And they're putting in MRAP vehicles in small towns that have had no crime. A lot of people are talking after the Iraq War, is what we're seeing happening in Iraq. They're talking about the lies that began all of that, the lies from the Bush administration. But the collapse of Iraq that was preceded by lies was also preceded by another lie. And that lie was the same lie they used to create Homeland Security. And, of course, that lie was 9/11. That was the collapse of Building 7. And as I was pointing out just before the break, there is now a measure that they're trying to get on the ballot in New York City. They've collected 53,000 signatures. And, of course, the way they report this in Ross' story, they say conspiracy theorists. They love to use that word all the time. Well, they're skeptics. They don't believe that this third building that wasn't hit by anything just fell down all by itself, especially when we have recordings of the guy who owned the building saying, pull it, which is what the phrase that they use for building demolition. So they got 53,000 people that want to see this measure put on the ballot. What is the measure? The measure wants voters to decide whether New York City's Department of Buildings should investigate the collapse of any building taller than 20 stories, going back to September 11th, 2001. This is from the New York Coalition for Accountability Now. Now, the interesting thing is, in the article, they say, well, you know, this has all been investigated by NIST, by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and they found in 2008 that it just collapsed as a result of fires. Well, if you really believe that, wouldn't you want to investigate it instead of shutting it down? Wouldn't you really want to have a thorough investigation? Wouldn't you want to know why those how did it catch fire to that degree? We've seen skyscrapers burning for days that are steel skyscrapers that did not come down. So let's have a little bit of a discussion about that. But what is going on now is the product of that lie. After they have taken down Iraq with lies, they've destroyed that country, they've cost more soldiers' lives in Iraq have been lost than died in 9/11. Who knows how many Iraqis have died in that country? That country is being destroyed, has been destroyed. Now they're bringing about the collapse of America. And it's the institution that was created as an answer to their false flag at 9/11. Just look at the headlines from the Drudge Report today. Pelosi is going to greet new arrivals at the border. She's very happy with that. And, of course, now the First Lady of Honduras is coming to tour immigration shelters in Texas. Do you get the idea that this is NAFTA, that this is not America anymore, that they've all agreed that this is just fine? We've got mothers telling people, get across and you stay, your children can go to school. And, of course, the New York City is wanting these immigrants. They can't get enough of this voting bloc in New York because they want to have total control there. They're going to issue ID cards. They're setting up public defender's office to fight deportations, even though most of these people are not going to show up to their trials. They've got a backlog of, somebody reported yesterday, 360,000. And, of course, that's going to take years to go through that backlog, even if they show up. And, of course, we see immigration activists are going to the White House. They're concerned about harsh anti-immigrant rhetoric, it says. They think that this is an excuse not to act on immigration reform. Well, you know, let's channel Harry Reid and Hillary Clinton. What difference does it make? What difference does immigration reform make? I mean, is it going to make, if they reform the immigration laws, will Obama obey them now? If they reform the immigration laws, will Homeland Security obey them? You know, will the illegal immigrants obey the new immigration laws? They're not obeying the laws now. Why would we bother to reform them? Reforming the immigration laws is just code word for amnesty. They want to increase the welfare state. They want to change the demographics of this country. They want to bring in the youngest people that they can so that they will become indebted to the United States government. So they will do whatever the U.S. government wants. When you talk about bringing in the UN to establish martial law in the United States, you don't need to bring in foreign troops. If you can open up the borders and bring in young people from Central and South America. This is a tactic that all dictators have always known. You get the children at an early age and they're theirs for life. Hitler said that about the Hitler Youth. This is something that goes all the way back to Plato's Republic. Plato's Republic, he said, well, we're going to have a society that essentially has 3 levels. We're going to have the rulers, we're going to have the guardians, we're going to have everybody else. And we are going to make sure that no one knows who their mothers and fathers are. Their only loyalty is going to be to the state. So we are going to make sure that that they're removed from their parents, that we have these wild orgies. We sexualize the culture in the sense that no one knows who their children are. They're raised by the state, and they have no loyalties to their family. Because when you have loyalties to your family, when you have a cultural background there, that checks what the government can do. They don't want to see that. Now, and of course, the White House press secretary said just yesterday that they're not going to wait around and sit around and wait for Congress to write new laws. Of course they're not. They really don't care what those laws would be in the first place. And we also got some news about the police state. We've got Keith Alexander has now made the jump to highly paid consultant. You know, it's not just Hillary Clinton that gets the big bucks when she speaks. He is now offering himself out. First, he put himself out for $1 million a month as a consultant. Now he's putting himself out as $600,000. You're getting a discount. That's a pretty hefty discount. It's about a 40% discount. This is a guy who is, of course, was just recently at Bilderberg, talking to those guys there. And actually, he had gone to Bilderberg in 2012, speaking privately with all these people while he was still head of the NSA. And Alan Grayson, a congressman, has called him out, and he says, well, if he's got anything useful to offer at that price, maybe he's peddling national security secrets, because having the Snowden leaks happen on your watch isn't much of a resume builder.
Everything we said came true. Everything we've done has been right.
Oregon is going to be celebrating Independence Day with a no-refusal blood checkpoint. They're renaming the 4th of July weekend the No Refusal Weekend. So watch out if you're in Oregon. This is a story from Steve Watson that's up on Infowars.com. Here's their clip.
In the past, Eugene police officer Ryan Stone says if someone was pulled over under the suspicion of driving while intoxicated, one could refuse a breath test, but would face fines and a year-long suspension of their license. Under no refusal, Stone says police will be able to file for a search warrant through an on-call judge and draw blood at the station.
The only difference now is that we have a better tool available to us for when that happens.
That's the ACLU coming in and saying, hey, that's fine. You just get on the phone and you tell the judge and he rubber stamps whatever you tell him. I have a problem with that. We've had numerous examples of people having blood drawn from them across the country, finding that they were completely sober. So this whole thing about pulling people over there, and they've redefined what drunk driving is to the point where I think a lot of people who are dangerously drunk, who are chronic repeaters, are getting off because so many people understand that they've lowered so many times the definition of what a drunk driver is, that they're giving these people a pass on this. I've seen it myself when I was in traffic court for other things. I've seen people getting a pass on it just going before the judge. So this is a very dangerous thing. This is how our rights disappear. We're going to have Paul Joseph Watson on in the next segment talking about a police officer who actually stands up for people's rights. But before we get to that, while we're on cars, I talked yesterday about the coming computer-controlled cars, computer-driven cars that will really be controlled by the government. They will control when and where you can go, keeping certain areas off limits to you. And let's think about how that's going to be sold to us. One of the ways it's going to be sold to us is it's going to protect us from these dangerous drivers. And certainly, we're more than willing to give up our freedom and our rights to have checkpoints where they stop and inspect you on the road as you're going without any probable cause. It's not like you're weaving across the road. These are checkpoints where they stop people. And we say, that's fine. We'll do that for safety. Well, what they're doing is they're offering these computer-driven cars out there. Google is telling people it's going to reduce the number of deaths and accidents by 90%. It's like, really? Will it? They're going to put you in these cars with no steering and no brakes, completely under computer control. Well, how is that working out for us now? Well, they tell us that there's so many systems that are already in our cars. We have a lot of systems that are operating automatically, anti-lock brakes or airbags, for example. And now we have a story from Reuters, an exclusive airbag accident and a lawsuit led to the GM Cruise recall. An accident that left a Georgia woman blind in one eye and a subsequent lawsuit led to General Motors' recall of about 33,000 Chevy Cruises in North America for potentially defective airbags. So are we going to hear about that when the computer crashes, literally crashes your car, when you get the blue screen of death, or it drives you, the navigation software starts driving you in circles or drives you into a lake? Of course, you're not going to hear about that. That's going to be covered up, but they will use that as leverage to get you into a car, to make you helpless, to make you dependent, to keep you controlled, to control the transportation nodes. And we see this article that's up on Infowars.com about artificial intelligence. And of course, remember that this is really, there's also an artificial intelligence aspect to these quote-unquote self-driving cars. They're not self-driving cars. Self-driving cars are what you have today when you drive yourself. These are going to be computer-driven, government-controlled cars. And of course, when they're in a situation where they have a potential accident, they're already talking about the kind of ethical trade-offs that these AI units within your cars are going to have to make. Are they going to, if a pedestrian pushing a baby carriage is crossing in front of you, is it going to swerve you into a truck because there's only one person in your car?
You are watching the best of the Alex Jones Show, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central. Watch live at Infowars.com/show or become a member of InfoWarsNews.com and help us take resistance to the next level.